I overheard my mother calling me worthless. Not in anger, not in jest, just calmly, like stating a fact. It was the day she asked to borrow my apartment for a small family gathering. I thought it would be a quiet dinner. Turns out it was my sister's engagement party with over 30 guests. I stood in my own kitchen, invisible. My paintings were taken down, replaced by photos of a couple I barely recognized. That night, something broke inside me. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about waking up, and once you wake up, there's no going back. The classroom always smelled faintly of tempera paint and sharpened pencils. I loved that smell. It meant color, creation, and a kind of freedom my students didn't yet realize they had. When a child dipped a brush into blue and dragged it across the paper, they were making their own world. That morning, as I bent over to help a little boy mix yellow into green, I felt alive. They laughed, splattered paint, and called my name with the kind of pure affection adults rarely give. In that moment, I thought maybe my life wasn't so small after all. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I excused myself, smiling at the kids, and stepped into the hallway. The screen flashed, "Mom," I answered, still riding the warmth of my morning. "Alyssa, my darling," she said, her voice drenched in honey. "I'm so proud of you, always giving, always working with those children. You're such a blessing." My chest swelled a little. Those words were rare, and I savored them like water in the desert. "I was wondering," she continued, her tone dropping into casual sweetness. "Your sister just got engaged. Isn't it wonderful? We want to celebrate, but our house is under renovation. It would mean so much if we could use your apartment for a small gathering. Just family, nothing big." For a moment, I hesitated. My apartment wasn't much, but it was mine. The one corner of the world that didn't feel borrowed. Still, I heard myself say, "Of course, Mom. Whatever you need." "You're an angel," she said, relief washing through her words. "It'll only be a handful of us. You won't even notice." When the call ended, I slid the phone back into my pocket, a faint unease fluttering in my stomach. But before I could dwell on it, the phone buzzed again. A voicemail. I pressed play. Her voice came through, sharp and careless, as if she'd forgotten the call was still recording. "That useless girl will do. She's got nothing going on anyway. At least her place is good for something." The words struck me harder than I expected. For a few seconds, I just stood in the empty hallway, the laughter of children muffled behind the classroom door. Had I heard it right? My hand shook slightly as I replayed it. Worthless. Useless. The same undertone I'd felt my entire life, now said aloud with brutal clarity. I told myself maybe it was stress talking. Maybe she didn't mean it, but the echo lodged in my chest, impossible to shake. That evening, when she called again, I tried to test her. "So, Mom, are you sure it won't be too many people? My place isn't very big." "Oh, Alyssa," she sighed, painting herself the victim. "Don't be so small-hearted. It's your sister's engagement. Can't you just do this one thing for her? She's worked so hard. She deserves this." The guilt pressed heavy, familiar as an old coat. I swallowed my doubts. "Yes, of course." After we hung up, I sat in the living room, staring at my paintings on the walls. They were the only proof I was building something of my own. But the voicemail kept repeating in my head. Useless. Worthless. The next day, I met Beth for coffee. She was my anchor, the one friend who never made me feel invisible. I told her about the request, about the voicemail. Beth frowned, stirring her cup with a sharp clink. "Alyssa, that doesn't sound like stress. That sounds like the truth she usually hides. You can't let her walk over you." "She's my mother," I said softly, the words tasting bitter. "Maybe I'm overreacting." Beth reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You're not. Just keep your eyes open." That weekend, she came over to help me tidy the apartment. We cleared out the recycling, wiped down the counters. Beth was rummaging through the trash bag when she froze. "Alyssa," she whispered. I turned, heart skipping. In her hand was a crumpled stack of papers, smudged with coffee stains but still legible. My stomach dropped as I read the header. Engagement celebration schedule. It wasn't just a small family gathering. The plan listed catering orders, floral arrangements, seating charts for 30 guests, even a photographer's arrival time. Every detail was mapped out, every corner of my apartment labeled as if it belonged to them. Beth's eyes locked on mine. This was never going to be small. She's been planning it all along. I stared at the pages, the lines blurring as anger and disbelief fought for space inside me. My chest burned, my throat dry. Beth's voice cut through, low and firm. "She's not just borrowing your space, Alyssa. She's taking it, and she thinks you'll never stop her." I couldn't answer. All I could do was clutch the papers in my trembling hands, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out every other sound. Something inside me shifted that night, subtle but undeniable. A seed of realization. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't overreacting. Maybe the truth was darker than I had ever let myself believe, and for the first time in years, I felt the faint stirrings of defiance. The first sign of intrusion came on a Tuesday afternoon. I returned from work to find two men in coveralls dragging paint cans and ladders through my front door. My breath caught in my throat. "What are you doing in here?" I demanded. One of them glanced up, casual, as if I were the intruder. "Your mother said we're redoing the living room for the engagement party. Fresh coat, maybe new shelves." My chest tightened. "You can't just— This is my home." I stormed into the kitchen, dialing Mom. She answered on the first ring. "Sweetheart," she said, already slipping into the voice of innocence. "There are strangers in my apartment, painters. Did you send them?" A pause, then a trembling inhale. "Oh, Alyssa, I thought you'd be happy. The place could use a little love, and your sister deserves something special. Don't be upset with me. I only wanted to help." I didn't agree to this. Her voice cracked with tears. "I'm old, Alyssa. I'm only trying to make things nice for your sister's big day. Why must you always be so hard on me?" I froze, guilt flooding in like water through a broken dam. The script was familiar. I object. She cries. I fold. My hand shook as I hung up. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring into the dark. The smell of wet paint clung to the air. Slowly, I turned my head as if to an unseen audience. My voice came out raw. A whisper meant more for them than for me. Am I overreacting? Or is she really taking my life apart, piece by piece? The next morning, my phone lit up with a notification. My sister had posted on Instagram, "Can't wait to move into our new place." Below it, a photo of her fiancé smiling on my balcony. My blood ran cold. The comments were full of congratulations, people praising her beautiful home. They had no idea it wasn't hers. Later that week, I ran into her outside a boutique, bags dangling from her arms. She beamed when she saw me. "Alyssa, guess what? We've already started changing our address. It's so exciting. This apartment is perfect for starting a life together." I stared, speechless. "What did you just say?" "Oh, don't worry," she said breezily. "It's just paperwork. We had to put down an address for the registry, so we used yours. I figured it wouldn't matter. We'll be living there soon anyway." Her words sliced through me like glass. That night, when I returned home, I found my closet emptied. My dresses were folded into boxes, stacked against the wall. My nightstand gone. My bookshelves dismantled. In their place, a wide open space with floral arrangements already waiting in buckets. I called Mom again, my voice trembling with rage. "You took my things. Where is my furniture?" She laughed softly as if I were being childish. "Oh, honey, we needed room for guests. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "You can't. This is my apartment." "For now. But wouldn't it be easier if you just signed the temporary lease transfer? That way, when your sister gets married, they won't have to go through the trouble of moving. Think of it as a gift from you." My heart pounded. "You want me to give up my home?" "Don't be dramatic. You can always find another place. This is about family. About sacrifice." My hands clenched into fists. For the first time in years, I wanted to scream. Instead, I dug through the kitchen drawer for my rental agreement. The pages smelled faintly of dust and ink. As I scanned the text, my breath stopped. There, at the bottom of the latest addendum, was my signature. Except it wasn't mine. The date was from last week. A new clause allowed for a transfer of tenant rights to my sister and her fiancé. I felt dizzy. The room tilted. She hadn't even asked. She had forged my name. I confronted her the next morning, shoving the document across the kitchen table. "This isn't my signature." She barely glanced at it. "Don't be ridiculous. You're imagining things. Always so paranoid. If you're this stressed, maybe you should see someone." The gaslight burned hot, searing my sanity. I clutched the paper, tears threatening to spill. "How could you do this to me?" Her smile was thin, her eyes cold. "You'll thank me one day. Family comes first." Later that afternoon, the phone rang. I picked up, my voice still shaking. It was my landlord. "I just got your message," he said. "My message?" "The one about transferring the lease to your sister. I was confused since we never discussed it. What's going on, Alyssa?" My fingers went numb. "I didn't send you anything." Silence stretched across the line, heavy and sharp. And for the first time, I knew I was standing on the edge of something far darker than I had ever let myself imagine. The night of the engagement party arrived like a storm I couldn't stop. Strangers filled every corner of my apartment, voices rising above the music, champagne glasses clinking against my counters. My paintings, once a gallery of my private soul, were gone. In their place, framed photos of my sister and her fiancé smiled down at me from my own walls. I could hardly breathe. I had one small plan, a fragile grasp at control. I had invited Eric, my ex-boyfriend, hoping his presence might remind me that I still had connections of my own. Maybe it would show them I wasn't invisible. When he walked through the door, handsome in his navy suit, my heart lifted slightly. But before I could greet him, my mother's voice cut across the room, slicing me open in front of everyone. "Eric, what a surprise. I didn't think Alyssa still had friends who'd come around. How long has it been since you two split? 3 years? 4? A few guests chuckled politely. Heat flushed across my face. I tried to smile, but my hands trembled. I pulled Eric aside, whispering, "I'm sorry. She shouldn't have said that." He looked uneasy, his eyes darting toward the crowd. "It's fine. Don't worry." But the unease in his tone confirmed the truth. I wasn't fine, and I was dragging him into the chaos. Then came the moment that shattered the thin glass of my composure. My sister stood on a makeshift stage, my coffee table, and raised her hand for attention. "Everyone, I want to share something special tonight. It's not just my engagement we're celebrating." The room hushed, eyes glued to her glowing face. She reached for Eric's arm. My stomach turned to ice. "Eric and I are together now," she announced proudly. "We've been dating for a while and I couldn't be happier." The applause was deafening. My ears rang, my vision blurred. I stared at Eric, who avoided my gaze, his face a mask of guilt. Then my mother's voice rose above the noise, dripping with triumph. "Finally, a man who knows what he wants. At least Eric found someone worthy. Your sister has always been the better match, Alyssa. You should be happy for her." Laughter rippled through the crowd. My chest caved in. Rage and humiliation collided until my body shook with the force of it. Something inside me snapped. I lunged toward the wall where a giant portrait of my sister and Eric smiled smugly. My hand seized the frame, and before I could stop myself, I hurled it to the floor. Glass shattered across the hardwood, scattering like shards of my sanity. The room gasped. My mother's face twisted into disgust. "You're sick," she hissed. "You've always been jealous. How dare you embarrass us like this? You're nothing but a burden." "Burden," I repeated under my breath, the word echoing like a curse. My hands were bleeding from the broken glass, but I barely noticed. The party dissolved into whispers, stares, and muffled laughter. I couldn't breathe. Without another word, I grabbed my coat and walked out, leaving behind the wreckage. Hours later, Beth arrived at my apartment. The door was unlocked. She stepped inside, expecting to find me curled in anger or tears. Instead, she found silence. No Alyssa. No warmth. Just an apartment stripped bare, smelling faintly of wine and wilted flowers. On the coffee table, she spotted a leather-bound journal. She hesitated, then opened it, her hands trembling. The entries stretched back months. Pages of dark ink poured Alyssa's soul onto paper. Memories of every insult, every manipulation, every moment she questioned her own worth. Again and again, the same phrase appeared. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am worthless. Beth's breath caught as she read further. One passage made her heart stop. Sometimes I think it would be easier if I weren't here at all. At least then they wouldn't have anything left to take from me. Tears blurred her vision. She flipped to the last page where a line stood out in bold, deliberate letters. If they ever push me too far, I'm not defenseless. I've kept every voicemail, every call, every word they used to break me. I've recorded it all. One day, I'll use it. Her hand clutched the journal tight, a mix of fear and fragile hope rising within her. Alyssa wasn't gone forever. She was preparing for something. But where had she gone tonight? And what would happen when she returned? The cabin smelled of pine and rain-soaked wood. I had rented it under a false name, hidden away miles from the city. The silence pressed heavy at first, but it was a silence I could shape, unlike the suffocating hush that followed every one of my mother's condemnations. Out here, the air belonged to me. The ground under my feet did not judge. I began therapy with a counselor in the nearby town. Each session peeled back layers I had buried, the guilt, the manipulation, the constant rewriting of reality. For the first time, I named it psychological abuse. I was not crazy. I was not worthless. I was a survivor. One afternoon, while shopping for groceries in the small town, I ran into a woman whose face stirred something deep in memory. She looked at me with a flicker of recognition. "You're Margaret's daughter, aren't you?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "I went to high school with her," the woman replied, her smile fading into something more fragile. "We were best friends once. Until she ruined me." I froze. "What do you mean?" Her eyes glistened. She had a way of twisting things, making you feel loved, then cutting you off at the knees. I thought I was special to her, but she used me, humiliated me in front of everyone. I never fully recovered. And her sister, your aunt, she wasn't as strong. She didn't survive Margaret's cruelty. My chest tightened. Her sister? The woman nodded slowly. She took her own life. Margaret never spoke of it. I suppose she wouldn't. She always needed to keep her image perfect. The world tilted. My mother hadn't just broken me. She had destroyed before. This wasn't new. It was a cycle. That night, I sat in the dim light of the cabin, my journal open, pen trembling in my hand. I wrote, not for myself, but for the invisible audience I now felt breathing behind me. If you've ever been strangled by your own mother's hands, not physically, but with words, with love poisoned into control, I see you. I understand you. Tears spilled as I wrote. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. With the clarity came anger, sharp and steady. I could no longer be their scapegoat. I would fight, not with fists, but with truth. I began to plan. I studied recordings of my mother's voice, mimicking her tone, her phrasing. Late at night, I practiced until my voice slipped into hers so seamlessly I startled myself. Then I called my landlord, pretending to be her. Calmly, I asked about the lease transfer, weaving questions she herself might have asked. The call recorded cleanly, proof that something was wrong. Next, I gathered every voicemail, every text, every shred of evidence. I compiled a dossier thick with their cruelty. Documents of forged signatures, photos of my stripped apartment, social media posts where my sister claimed my home as hers. The more I built the case, the stronger I felt. Each piece of paper was a stone in the wall I was erecting to protect myself. I ordered a hidden camera and installed it when I briefly returned to the apartment, careful not to alert them. The lens stared silently from the bookshelf, waiting to capture whatever came next. Days turned into weeks, and my resolve hardened. No longer was I Alyssa, the invisible daughter. I was Alyssa the witness, Alyssa the survivor, Alyssa who would not be erased. Then, one morning, a thick envelope arrived at the cabin, my name scrawled in elegant legal script. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a letter from my mother's attorney. The words bled together as I read. Our client seeks reimbursement for expenses incurred in hosting her younger daughter's engagement celebration, held at your residence. This includes catering, decorations, and property modifications, totaling. The number at the bottom made my stomach lurch. Thousands of dollars! I stared at the page, fury igniting like fire in dry grass. She wasn't just trying to take my home. She was trying to make me pay for my own destruction. I folded the letter slowly, my jaw tight, my pulse steady. This was no longer a private war. It was open, and I was ready. The courthouse smelled of dust and stale paper. My hands trembled only slightly as I passed the clerk the folder. Dozens of pages of evidence neatly bound, each one a weapon forged from the very words they had used to crush me. Recordings, texts, photographs. My mother's voice calling me worthless, my sister claiming my apartment as hers, the forged lease. The clerk stamped the date, slid the folder back, and I felt a surge of power I had never known. But the courtroom wasn't the only place I would fight. That night, I sat in the cabin with my laptop glowing in the dark. I typed furiously, every sentence both a confession and an accusation. I titled it, "My Mother Called Me Worthless." I described the years of manipulation, the stolen apartment, the humiliation at the engagement party. I embedded recordings, screenshots, photos of my gutted home. I told the world what it was like to be erased by the people who were supposed to protect you. I hit publish. The response was immediate, like a fuse meeting fire. Within hours, strangers commented, "This was my life too." "You are not alone. Your mother is a textbook narcissist." By morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. By the end of the week, it was viral. News outlets reached out for interviews. Podcasts wanted me to tell my story. My inbox overflowed with messages of solidarity from women and men who had survived the same nightmare. And with every share, every message, my mother's carefully crafted image cracked further. On social media, people dug into her accounts. Old photos of family perfection were mocked. Her smiling face was captioned with words like toxic manipulator, narcissist. My sister wasn't spared either. The image of her standing in my apartment, boasting about her new home, was reposted with comments calling her entitled, cruel, blind to her sister's pain. The narrative had shifted. No longer was I the invisible daughter. They were the villains. Then came the comment that made my heart stall. It was buried beneath thousands of others, but its words pierced through the chaos. "I used to date your mother. I know things you don't. We should talk." I stared at it, pulse racing, a chill crawling up my spine. What did he mean? What secrets still lingered in her past? But even as that question gnawed at me, the destruction of their world continued. My sister's fiancé, under mounting public pressure, called off the wedding. His family wanted nothing to do with the drama, and within days, he moved out of the spotlight entirely. My sister's social media accounts vanished. My mother faced consequences more brutal than she could have imagined. She was asked to step down from her position on the neighborhood council after residents confronted her about the scandal. Donations to her cherished charities dried up. Invitations stopped arriving. She had built her entire life on appearances, and now those appearances were poisoned. I should have felt triumphant, but instead I felt hollow, watching her empire collapse. Until the night she came to me. It was raining. I heard the knock at the cabin door, slow and desperate. When I opened it, she was there, my mother, once regal and untouchable, now drenched, her knees hitting the ground before I could speak. "Alyssa," she sobbed, mascara bleeding down her face. "Please, I'm sorry. I lost everything. I never meant to hurt you like this. Please forgive me. You're all I have left. For years, I had dreamed of this moment. I had imagined yelling at her, demanding answers, maybe even striking her down with the force of my rage. Instead, I stood frozen, the rain soaking us both. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. My voice was quiet, steady. I forgive you, but I will not forget. And I will not come back. Her sobs broke against the storm, but I felt nothing. No triumph, no hatred, no pity. Only release. I closed the door. Inside, I pressed my back against the wood, my heart pounding. It was over, yet not. The story wasn't finished, because forgiveness wasn't freedom. It was simply the final act of letting go. And I had not yet begun to live. The gallery was silent before the doors opened, the air heavy with turpentine and the faint hum of spotlights warming against canvas. I stood in the center, surrounded by the fragments of my life made visible, paintings born from pain, twisted into color and shadow. The exhibition was called Worthless, though every piece on the wall defied that word. One canvas showed a faceless woman whispering venom into a child's ear. Another depicted a girl trapped in a glass house, her palms pressed against invisible walls while party guests laughed outside. My most searing piece was a portrait of myself dissolving into shards of glass, each fragment bearing the word my mother had used to define me. When the doors opened, people streamed in. They stood silently before the paintings, some covering their mouths, others wiping tears they didn't expect. A journalist approached, notebook in hand. "Alyssa, can you tell us what this collection represents?" I lifted my chin. "It's not just my story. It's the story of anyone who has been silenced in their own family. Trauma doesn't vanish, it transforms, and art is my transformation." The following week, I sat under bright studio lights, speaking into a national camera. The interviewer asked, "Do you hate your mother for what she did?" I hesitated, then answered truthfully, "No, hatred is just another cage. What I feel is clarity. She will live with her choices, and I will live free." The broadcast spread. More people reached out, survivors of toxic families who told me my words had given them language for their own hidden wounds. For the first time, my pain had purpose. Then came the twist that tilted my world. An email arrived with the subject line, "We should meet." It was from the man who had left the comment on my blog. We arranged to meet in a quiet cafe. He was older, with eyes that carried a familiar sadness. "Alyssa," he said softly, "you don't know me, but I know you. I'm Daniel. I dated your mother many years ago." I waited, heart pounding. "She never told you about me, did she?" His voice cracked. "Because I'm your father. She cut me out of your life before you were born. I fought to see you, but she made sure I couldn't." The world blurred. My throat closed. 1,000 questions swirled, but none formed words. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small photo, worn at the edges. It was of me as a baby, asleep in his arms. His hand shook as he slid it across the table. "I kept this all these years. I always hoped you'd find me." Tears spilled hot down my cheeks. It was a truth my mother had buried so deep I never imagined it existed. She had stolen not only my voice, but my bloodline. Yet instead of breaking me, the revelation stitched something together. The void inside me suddenly had shape, not just absence. For the first time, I saw my mother's control for what it was. Fear. Fear of losing power. Fear of being exposed. I walked out of that cafe with a new piece of my identity reclaimed. And strangely, I felt lighter. Months later, I moved into a new apartment in another city, bright, filled with plants and canvases. But it wasn't only for me. I adopted a little girl from a foster program, a quiet child with wide eyes who reminded me of myself. She sat at my kitchen table, painting the world in bright strokes of red and blue, her small hand gripping mine when she grew unsure. I founded an organization soon after, a nonprofit for survivors of familial manipulation. We offered therapy, support groups, and art workshops. The rooms filled quickly, each chair holding someone who had believed they were alone until they weren't. At the opening ceremony, I stood before the group, my adopted daughter at my side, her paint-streaked fingers clasping mine. "This isn't just about survival," I said, voice steady. "It's about rebirth. If you are living in a golden cage, remember, the key has always been in your hand. I used mine. Now it's your turn." Applause filled the room, but what echoed loudest was the silence inside me. Peace, finally, where once there had been nothing but noise.